I'm delighted to kick off this latest Speakers Corner event from Innovate Island. We've got a good few members of Innovate Island community on the call today, as well as a good number of first-time visitors from all over the world, as far as I can tell. And you're all extremely welcome to be here today. For the newbies in the audience, my name is Charlie Tuxworth, and I'm one of the co-founders of Innovate Island. And we are a collaborative network that actually had its roots in very informal chats in coffee shop meetings, in coffee shops between other meetings and other business commitments. So a couple of us would meet up, drink far too much coffee, share our stories, challenges, worries, aspirations. And really there became a safe place to discuss, moan, share ideas, and try and pick up a little bit of inspiration. So when we actually realized that this support mechanism didn't exist in any other format on the island of Ireland, we ultimately created Innovate Island, which is where we are today. So we have become the all-island go-to community for practitioners, advocates, and explorers of innovation. We're a forum for some really great content, best practice, and thought leadership. And we now represent nearly 300 members' views and ambitions at a national and international level. We're working very closely with support agencies, policymakers, and we're trying to help them as they try to make positive, impactful changes to the economy, to the environment, and to society as well. And we're providing a route through to the perspectives of some very, very talented people in the innovation space. We're completely non-commercial, so if you are on the island of Ireland or operate from here, then look for us on LinkedIn, check out innovateisland.net, and you're very welcome to join us. So we're absolutely delighted today to have Ric Fernandez joining us from Florida. So thank you, Ric, for coming along. Ric is a good friend, co-worker, colleague of Owen, so it feels right just for me now to hand over to Owen to do a proper introduction. So Owen, over to you.
Thanks, Charlie. And Ric does deserve a proper intro, but actually, friend and colleague is more important than some of the other supposedly technically more important stuff. So we are a network, we are friends, we do have banter and take the proverbial out of each other. That has proven every bit as valuable as some of the more technical stuff we do. But for today, we said we'd do a bit of work. We said we'd talk about a topic, an important topic, but a tough topic. Because innovation measurement, really? Can you actually do that meaningfully? Can you actually do that impactfully? Well, there have been quite a number of false dawns, false leads, a whole lot of false impressions by people who thought they were measuring in a useful way. But were they measuring the right things? Did they know the limits of measurement? Did they know best practice? Well, praise the Lord, or whomever you're dealing with these days. The world has moved on. We do have a combination of clear, established, and emerging best practice globally, as well as within different sectors, spheres. And that means actually it's time for a standard to actually help. That's a good environment to bring in a standard for global best practice on innovation measurement. And you do need to then consider scope and limits and clarity and valuable recommendations, actionable as opposed to wishy-washy language. And you do need to consider the right perspectives. And you do need to show people examples of what good looks like. And you do need to have a model. Now, can we do all that in 20 minutes? No. But if you take that link, best practice, let's have a look at ISO might help. Let's look at a visual framework, a model, if you like, for how you can begin to think about it and then execute innovation operation measurement. We can have a look at that today. We certainly also will have a look at how personas and measurement interact, how they interrelate. I know there's plenty of personal examples in this room, and we're definitely going to flush out a couple of those. And of course, we get a little peek under the hood at what's coming in terms of a developing ISO standard, what good looks like, what works, what doesn't work. Okay, now let's have a little think about Ric. Ric is, as Charlie said, a friend and a colleague of mine. We've worked closely together since 2019. Ric knows innovation management. Ric knows systems. Ric, from Baldridge days to now, has had a leading role in the US. He still keeps that leading role on systems. He is a leader in IAO IP internationally. He has a lead role for the US with all of the innovation management standards. He shares that work with Frank Vole, who's also on the call today. And within ISO, Ric co-leads the development of this standard, ISO 56008. Still at a committee draft stage, so it's still in the works, but that will be the global best practice standard for innovation, operation, measurement. Now, doing that work is a pain in the, you can look at it like sausages. If you like sausages, don't go look at a sausage factory. Or you can look at it as, well, you do have to wrestle and wrangle both those images. You do have to wrestle and wrangle alligators. We're talking about egos. We're talking about getting people from all around the world to speak each other's language, to get over the egos, form, storm, norm, perform, we're used to that model, and then start the competition of ideas that produces clear, actionable, best practice advice. So if you ask me, that combination of the history of leadership and the expertise on what it took to wrestle alligators to get ISO 56008 to the place where it is now makes Ric our best guide for this discussion in Innovate Island. Ric, I'm going to welcome you in a second and the floor will be yours, so it's time to tee up those slides. Just to point to everybody, generally we take 20 to 30 minutes for the talk that Ric is going to lead us on, and then we want to poke holes in it and give him a hard time for about 20 minutes. So do put your questions up on chat during the talk. We will have a real proper conversation afterwards. We hope to be closing around 1:50 thereabouts. Definitely will let everybody back to their normal daily lives for 2 p.m. Ric, it really is over to you. Thank you again.
Well, thank you as well, Owen. And sometimes I wonder when people start, talking about those introductions, if you're doing it or if it was my mother doing them, But but thank you very much. And just to reiterate what Owen was saying, for those of us who are old enough, you may remember this picture here. Does anybody remember that? Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, Crocodile Dundee, and he did have to wrangle a lot of different alligators, so to speak. Well, today we're going to be talking about the management of innovation, the trick, basically, that Owen was referring to, and how do you measure it? A little bit about ISO 56000 series of standards and how the measurement one fits in. So how do you select indicators and metrics, and then some examples of them, some potential problems with them, and lastly, looking specifically at innovation operations processes, which is what 56008 is about. But before we do that, Owen, you said to me that we had a measurement trick. So I went on the internet, I looked for measurement trick, and I found a measurement trick. And the measurement trick has to do with how do you determine your age. You use a tape measure. This is crazy, right? You use a tape measure and you look for the number that agrees with your age plus 100. So in my case, not your age, your date of birth. So in my case, it's 1953. So you look for 153, okay? You put the beginning of the tape measure, you make a loop, and you put the beginning of it there, and then you go all the way down until you find the year that we're in. So in this case, 2022. So you look for 2022, you go across, you look for 131, which is, in this case gives you 131. You subtract 100 from it. Now you take that 31 and you subtract it from 100 and you get your age. I will be 69 years old on June 21st. Pretty cool, huh? There's actually an algebraic formula that proves how this will always work. The only time it won't work is if it's over 100 years. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. So now you really do have a measurement tape trick to talk about. So let's talk about innovation. Innovation is the trick. The management of innovation is the trick. First of all, most people think of standardizing innovation as being impossible, but really there's a trick to it, right? The trick is to find a way to maximize value while minimizing risk. So maximizing value while minimizing risk and resources, okay? And then by managing it with your measurements, and managing your initiatives and your portfolio. So it isn't just managing the overall portfolio or any one particular project, but managing each of the initiatives and how do they fit? What do they provide for the overall portfolio? Because a portfolio is where you're going to be managing all these things. You're going to be managing to maximize your value, to minimize your risk, and to minimize your resources. So first of all, you got to really understand what's important to the organization. In the old days, okay, and I call it the old days prior to 56002, we tended to have an idea-driven innovation model, where you have ideas first. Basically, you had suggestion systems, hackathons, many different ways of creating ideas. I remember Mitsubishi, when we were at Florida Power and Light, we used them as a benchmark, and they had, I think it was like 14,000 ideas, okay, in one of their years. And what they would have to do then is they'd have to go through different filters and then defining them better and then estimating and then selecting. In other words, from those 14,000, maybe 100 or maybe even less got any kind of emphasis. Well, eventually those became projects and charters and so forth, and they had some success. But think about the lost time, the energy, the people that were upset about the fact that here you're asking me for all these ideas and you don't even listen to mine. You listen to everybody else's. So it's important that rather than just looking at it from an idea point of view, that we look at it from value, which then helps us, again, maximize our value and minimize our risk. Okay, so to do value-driven innovation, okay, you have now, as the standard talks about internally, you start off with your customer, your markets, your strategy, until you get to the intent. What is it that you want to drive? What is it? What intent do you want? What do you want improvement on? What do you want a new innovation about? Is it a new market? Is it a new service? Is it, if you focus on that, and then from there, you start developing your ideas, identifying your opportunities, creating your concepts, validating, developing, and deploying, then you're not wasting all that time with all those ideas up front that didn't have anything to do with your intent. So value-driven innovation focuses your efforts on those things that are important, and that's where you're going to focus your innovation efforts. Well, we need to be able to manage these different processes, innovation operations processes, in order to make sure that at the end you end up with the value that you were looking for. And you do that by managing the initiatives and also by managing the portfolio of all of the projects together. Historically, if you look at the 56,000 series of standards, the mother standard is basically 56,002. And then from 56,002, which I'm assuming most of you know about this, you go from the support area, and the support is provided by other standards that have been developed, like 56,003 for innovation partnerships, and the vocabulary, of course, 56,000. The evaluation and improvement from 56,004, which gave us some management assessment of the overall system. Some more support for IP management, intellectual property management. More context-driven decision-making with strategic intelligence management. And then operations is being worked on. As a matter of fact, Owen is one of the leaders there for an idea in the idea management standard, which is soon to go out within the next, I would say, 6 months or so. And lastly, well, not lastly, but the one that I'm leading, okay, with Soren Cohen, for innovation operations measurements, which we're going to be concentrating on today. But notice all the links that this 56008 has, because it isn't just focusing on the operations, but also how is operations affected by the different areas of 56002, as well as how does it affect those areas. So we need to focus here, but we need to also understand where we are in the context of everything. Another two standards that are being worked on. The most important one right now, which started about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, I guess, pretty soon, is 56001, which is going to be similar to 56002, except it's going to be a requirement standard, whereby 56002 is a guideline standard. So really, not everything that can be counted counts or is important, and not everything that counts can be counted. So we need to associate. We need to determine in our regular intent, okay, where we're going, the process that we get there, and the results. What are those things that we need to measure? So first of all, we got to decide what are the indicators. Indicators versus metrics. Indicators being those areas that are important to us, and then metrics being how do we measure those areas. It's important to measure things that are coming in, the preparation of the initiatives, the selection of them, and so forth, and measure that. But then it's also important to know that the operational functions are working correctly. So we need to know efficiency, we need to know any errors, we need to know timing. So those things, we're going to get into some examples of those soon. But you're going to have some qualitative measures, some quantitative measures. And in my opinion, what's most important is your outputs and your outcomes. But you've got to keep in mind, in order to be able to assure that you get the outputs and the outcomes that you're looking for, that you have to manage the operation. So you got to make sure here to have leading indicators that then drive the outputs and the outcomes that you're looking for. You are what you measure, right? So if you now take it by stages or by innovation processes, here's some examples. In the opportunity area, you want to know about the target customer, the customer pains and needs. A lot of the typical information that would come from a persona, from building a persona for a market segment. And then also, how does it fit strategically? How the opportunity that you're looking at, how does it fit? Then in the ideation phase, now you want to create, now you really want to be very creative. You want to create different types of ideas, numbers of ideas. How do they synthesize together? How do they fit together? And are they going to fit for the market that we're looking for? In the selection, super important, because in that selection and combination where you're putting together different ideas, throwing away others that don't make sense, or putting them away in a knowledge management database for future use, you want to look at the portfolio overall. You want to look at the portfolio balance. So you need to look at not just what the ROI is, but what risk are you taking? What are the mitigations that you're taking? And then what resources are you going to be using? It's in this area that most of the management, quote, the management of innovation happens, because that's where you're making the decisions, right, of what it is that you're going to be working on. Then in implementation, of course, you got to talk about the development platform and the tools, the cost targets, development speed, time to market, how much, and lastly, commercialization, where you actually look at your marketing processes, how quickly are people adopting your product. What is your sales organization doing? Are they able to go out and get the sales that you're looking for? Do they need more support? What's the time to start receiving the profit? What is the customers telling you? So here's some examples, okay, that we've been developing. For example, for the preparation side, what are the kind of indicators you're looking for? You're looking for knowledge about people, about the infrastructure, about how it aligns strategically. And some of the metric examples, for example, are percent necessary resources for the people, percent of infrastructure available or not available, percent alignment to the strategy, budget availability, percent of people experienced in collaboration. Do you have the people that have the skills to be able to do innovation? And there's ways to check on that. There's a few surveys out there. We have one that we're using with PCA in Guatemala. They've developed one over the years, which is very, very accurate, and tells you, basically what are the areas that each individual is doing well versus what are the areas that teams can be doing well. So you can actually use it to develop your teams and to select your teams as well. In terms of activity, you've got timeliness, efficiency, the typical stuff for the management of processes, okay? But you got to apply that to the innovation processes, and most importantly, the learning. Are there failures? Are there also successes? If there's successes, are you taking those successes and keeping track of them so you can replicate, or are you just looking at the failures? Lastly, your results, your return on the innovation investment, your failed projects, closed projects, your successful impact on social and environmental innovations, any new innovation ideas that were sourced from the outside. So some of the problems that we're dealing with, I'm trying to go sort of fast a little bit here because of the timing. But if you want me to slow down, Owen, I can. So some of the problems with innovation measurements are, number one, measuring only individual parts and not the whole portfolio. So we made sure in 56008 that we're not only looking at the individual idea, but more importantly, the individual concept as it goes through the opportunity. And then that is a certain set of measurements as it goes through the process. But we also need to have measurements on the portfolio. So overall, the portfolio is doing well, but some of the projects are failing. Okay, well, that's part of doing business in innovation. We all remember the innovator's dilemma, right? Where the innovator's dilemma talks about the fact that we're taught in MBA and business school that we can only select those things that have a very good ROI and that are almost 100% sure that they're going to succeed. Well, if you don't start taking some risks, some managed risks, some limited risks, you're never really going to have disruptive innovation. So we need to measure the overall portfolio, considering the fact that maybe some parts of it, some of the individual initiatives may not be doing as well. And by looking at the overall portfolio, then we can adjust. We can take some projects out that maybe are not doing very well, include in some new projects so that we minimize the overall risk and also maximize the efficiency of the resources that we're using. We can over or underestimate what measurements can do. We could have too many measurements. We're just going to have measurement hell, basically, and that happens a lot. So we got to reduce the measurements to only those vital few. Too much data instead of meaningful data. So you need to make sure that data isn't overwhelming us. And lastly, overlooking the organizational recognition. So it's important that we align not only to the strategy, but also to reward and recognition systems with our human resources management, so that we, what we measure and how we consider success, that also helps us motivate our people. So concentrating right now on the innovation operations processes, we can look at the objectives being related to preparation, activities, outputs, and so forth. We want to know why, what, who, when, where, how, and we need to identify the objectives. What are the outputs that we're looking for here, right? So that when we're working here, we can get ahead of it. We can determine what inputs we need in terms of, notice, not just resources, okay, but actual knowledge. And I keep saying knowledge because I don't think we've really done a good job of looking at knowledge management and the value of knowledge management towards innovation. Knowledge management becomes the repository of best practices, of worst practices, of failures, of things that others are doing that we can adapt, new technology, okay? Things that we need, that knowledge, that IP, okay, to be able to move forward quickly through our innovation activity. And the measurement of knowledge has not really taken off very well. We establish measurements that are suitable to track progress, because this is all process driven and performance. And then what is the intended outcome at each one of these? At Florida Power and Light, we were the first company that won the Deming Prize internationally. And after that, we established an award which later has been modeled in Europe, called the Malcolm Baldridge Quality Award. Now it's called Performance Excellence Award. Anyway, when people talk about that, right, and you apply for that award, you are giving permission to come in to examine and to find out whether, to validate what it is that you reported that you're doing that could be award winning. Well, one company that did win had an examiner in, and the examiner went in and asked the questions to somebody who was cleaning the floor, janitor, okay, and asked them, who is your customer? So what would you expect the janitor to say? The people that walk on the floor? Yeah, of course. But or maybe it could be my boss, right? Or maybe whoever it is that tells me what to do. Well, this janitor was so well trained that instead of giving that answer, his answer was internal or external, right? So, he already knew that there were different kinds of customers. Here, you're talking about the external customer, but going from process to process, you're really talking about internal customers to some degree. Like this process is the customer of this process because there's output from here going in here and so forth. The validate is part of the customers for create. So it isn't only within each process that we need to think about, but also at the output level of each of the processes. Is it providing what the next process customer requires? So we focus it at a higher level. We think of it as just your context at the bottom level here, your innovation operations processes, your innovation initiatives, and then your portfolio. If you focus on these four, okay, you're going to have a pretty good set of measurements that you can manage with. This puts it all together, I believe. It's a model that was put together through the team, but then Soren Cohen, with his animation, did a great job of it. And it starts off with your context, your leadership, your planning, and so forth, leading to your intent, and then looks at each of the individual initiatives in it and over time, right? So you could have one initiative start here, or maybe it's already in the validation stage, another one just starting over here, another one starting a little bit later. And each of these, though, is part of an overall initiative. But notice here, for example, that this initiative got started, got into concepts, and then when they were validating, we're not going to go any further with this. So that's all part of that innovation, of that management of the operation. All these are operational processes for each of the individual initiatives. So you have to be able to look at the overall portfolio and the individual initiatives to be able to say, okay, I'm going to add some new ones, replace them, and so forth, along the way to be able to maximize the value for your portfolio. For those of you who are familiar with balanced scorecards, we basically can have a layered metric scorecard for innovation portfolios. And that would include your context knowledge, so like, what is your knowledge of your customers, your leadership, executive involvement, very important in terms of innovation, organizational resources, what are the innovation resources that you have, what partners are you choosing in open innovation to work with you, okay? Are you working with your suppliers, or are you just trying to do it all internally? And for your innovation solutions, are they timely? Are they according to plan? What's the value that they're bringing? And lastly, what's your overall value, your overall ROI, social impacts, and environmental impacts. On a simplified view, because most executives won't look at all these, right? But the executives, you could put together some of these into indices. So you could have an innovation relevance index, you could have an innovation enablement, can't say that this morning, index, and an innovation value overall. And you could use a stoplight approach to them. All right. Oh, and how are we doing with time?
I think we're pretty near the end of our talk time, but that lines up, doesn't it?
Sort of. I mean, I only have one more that this here is an example that we could use during our discussion, and then I can close off just with benefits. Okay. Better measurable returns, enhanced competitive position, higher revenue, improved use of limited resources, reduce risks, more attractiveness to, especially these days, right, to try to get employees when employees are hard to find, companies being more attractive to new investments, higher valuation in the marketplace, and being able to understand, innovate, communicate, and repeat. So lastly, I do want to bring this up. As COO of IOIP, we've started a new certification program against 56002, and we welcome anybody who's interested in doing that for their company. So just get a hold of me, and I'm ready to go. Okay, and we'll work that with them. We have a few companies that are already getting started on that. Okay, that's about it. Owen, if you want, I can go back to the exercise. Up to you.
Well, thanks very much for that, Rick. I think it's worth pointing out that we've had a good reaction. There's a good number of things in the chat. So we do have time for a few questions. How long do you think the exercise will take?
Depends on how much we get in terms of participation. So the format is, I'm going to ask a question. How would we as a team, what do we think is a good way to establish an open innovation? How would you measure an open innovation event? And then, we can discuss it from that.
Okay, so you have put the question to the group. I think we all put our thinking caps on now. In what form would you like feedback, Rick?
Well, let's do the feedback. I'd rather see the people ask the question themselves. It might take a little longer, but I think that's better than just putting it in the chat.
Okay, so we've heard the question from Rick. Do you want to rephrase it, restate it rather, Rick, just so that everybody?
How would you measure, if you were now given the task of determining what to measure, okay, in an open innovation event? What is it that you would focus on, and what would you measure?
And we're looking for people to give that about, a minute's thought, and then to volunteer their thoughts. Let's give them that minute, Rick. And while they're thinking about that for a minute, let me just share with you some of the questions that we've got in the chat and elsewhere. So we do have people wondering about the slides. People really love them. I'm not sure how shareable that is. Is that free to share, or we have a little think about that?
I believe we can share them. There's only one there that I might have to, remove.
Yeah,
but all the others we can share.
Well, that would be a huge boon. Thank you very much for that, Rick. And when we get those slides, we will put them up in the thread on the LinkedIn private members page. Okay, we also had a question from Kelly. How do you get to the proverbial fail fast and allow for failure to be an acceptable outcome? Well, that's probably something you can at least make a quick comment to while people are thinking of the general question.
Sure. Yeah, Kelly, thanks for coming, by the way. I haven't seen Kelly in years. So the fail fast approach is good, except you can't do it for everything, right? So you have to be able to manage overall. How do you do that? Well, if you remember that funnel the animated funnel that I showed earlier, that funnel shows how a project can start, and during the project itself, you're measuring the project, the success of the project. You try to get to the point of failure, if there's going to be a failure, as quick as possible, remove it so that we're not continuing to use resources for it, and replace it with something else. And my experience has been that people tend to stay with the project, that's a failure, okay? Because then they're continuing to use resources on something that, could be used better elsewhere. I don't know if that answers your question, Kelly.
It does, Rick. I think I asked the question before you had the funnel slide. So I'm going to go with, given our historical relationships, great minds.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kelly. And I would add, Rick, to what you said, that question of, when do you fail? How do you manage that learning cycle? That's really more the focus of ISO 56007, the idea management standard, which will be coming up, as Rick said, next year. Okay, so hopefully we've given people not enough time, but nevertheless enough time that someone will volunteer a thought. Hands up anybody who's willing to volunteer a comment on Rick's challenge, open innovation, event or otherwise.
How would you measure it? Yeah. We don't have any takers?
This is Kelly. I'll jump in and kind of tie it back to the last question. I think I'd give you two answers. One is, do I have the resources available? I really liked how you talked about, do I actually have the resources available that are skilled in doing this particular kind of innovation? Because it doesn't really work if I've got 1/10 of every one of my people assigned to this innovation and 1/10 to the next.
Right.
And then I think the second is maybe an evaluation, and you may tell me this moves into that ISO kind of that failure operation, but what % of my failures are actual project failures because I kept them going too long, versus what % of my failures are, I'm going to put it in quotes, good failures, where I stopped the project in time.
Right. Well, I in open innovation, okay, we got to figure out, it's a little different than just, innovation inside your company. So what I tried to do first is I try to define what it is that I'm trying to get out of it, right? So what is your goal? Are you trying to just get people involved, get people engaged, or are you looking for a particular input? So to address your resource question, right? If within my company, I really don't have the expertise that I'm looking for, and when I say expertise, I'm talking about maybe technical expertise, right? Then I do want to bring into that open innovation forum those people that might bring it. Like, for example, specific consulting firms or supplier, okay? Like, for example, we're working with the sugar industry in Guatemala. Well, they don't know everything. They're very innovative, extremely innovative, okay? But they'll bring in the world leaders to come in and give them ideas in an open innovation type of environment. And those ideas then may become part of the new innovation portfolio, modified innovation portfolio, if they're worth doing. for example, well, I'm not going to get into, I can't get into those examples, but because it's a very competitive market, okay, believe it or not, sugar, it's very competitive. And
Rick, while you're having that conversation, we've also got a comment from Catherine. I would try to measure the depth or the quality of relationships in an open innovation network. Trust is the #1 currency.
Very good point, extremely good point. And that's all part of, who are you going to put into that particular event, right, to work with you. And absolutely trust. And I would go even further, Catherine, and I would say you also have to get NDAs, and you have to get the proper protection for what's being developed there.
Brilliant. So then if I could move to a question, maybe Shirley, can you speak? Do you have speaker facilities?
Yeah, if you can hear me. Thank you, Owen. Thanks.
Lovely. Great question.
I was just typing my answer as well to the previous question, and I completely agree with Catherine. I was just saying, engagement and relationships are key in an open innovation network. As Steve Jobs said, we don't employ the smart people so we can tell them what to do. We employ the smart people so they can tell us what to do. So I think that's key, and it's the quality of those people that's really key. So Ricardo, it's such a pleasure to hear from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm really interested in this and the balance between process and kind of bottom-up innovation. I teach innovation and business model innovation, and I've had 80 students from India, Nigeria, South America doing a business model innovation module over the past few weeks. And what I'm kind of champion with them is a lot of them come from an engineering background, and it's quite a challenge for them to actually be creative. So one of the groups that presented, they're from Lagos, sorry, in Nigeria. It's on an island. Most people live in the mountains, so they need to get to work. So they came up with the business model called Soul Rides, SOOLE Rides, which was kind of very much a bottom up, really, really user led. Most people there don't own a car, never mind having a portfolio. So I thought it was a really good business model. But how can people? These were 3 guys and 1 girl from Lagos in Nigeria. How can we enable them to have some of these process skills when they're very much doing innovation at a point of need in a really fast changing dynamic world?
Well, you can do that, right? You're just not going to be as efficient, and you're going to be taking a lot more risk than probably you need to, right? So the whole idea of 56002 is that you put all that together. You maximize your value, right? What you're trying to get, but at the same time you're trying to minimize what the resources are, minimize your risk, okay? And overall try to get it done as quick as possible. So I think measurement can help if they start measuring themselves and get some immediate feedback, right? And secondly, there are systems out there. Like we work with PCA, and they have a system, innovation management system online. Okay, and they're not that expensive to use, so they could easily put all of their projects into IMS, the PCA product, IMS execution. So, and there's others, there's others out there. I happen to work with them, so I know that they have it. But there's others out there, and I would suggest, creating a mini system, that they can do, and they can look. I'm sure they're not just doing one project, right? So if they're not, then I think it'd be better for them to try to look at it on a portfolio level, not just project level.
Okay, that's really good, and I must, that signposting some of those systems would be super useful. So thank you so much. I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, just you can get in touch with me directly. I'll show my email at the end here. Okay.
Thank you.
And in fact, there are people in this network who can help with those questions as well. Rick, absolutely, and others besides. So great question, Shirley. I'm going to read one comment, and then Alan has been waiting patiently to get his question out. He's busy clearing his voice as we speak. After Catherine's comment, Catherine Goodman wrote in, I would try to measure 1, level of engagement, 2, diversity of participants, 3, diversity of sources and expertise. 3 really cool perspectives.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, because that's going to give you a much richer input from your open innovation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. Now, Mr. Doherty, can you hear us?
Yeah, absolutely. I can indeed. And Rick, it's been really interesting, and this is a subject that's very kind of close to my heart. I worked for a large corporate innovation lab for a very, very big firm, and I'd love to get your perspective on the experience that I had in terms of this metrics shopping to make things work okay, because innovation in a large corporate setting is tough, to get buy-in and to get everyone bought in. So we used to bounce around quite a lot between different types of metrics, and we'd kind of pick and choose to try and frame whatever had happened. So for example, the numbers, the ideation numbers, how many ideas do we put into the top of the funnel? Every now and again, a senior person would put their weight behind an initiative, and you get so many ideas. It would be part of everyone's goals, and it would be mandated that people would submit ideas, and it was a prestige thing. But then, as the innovation lab, we used to try and sift through them, and when they went for the big numbers, a lot of the time the quality would be really terrible. We'd be struggling to get anything that was viable out of the end of that process. But then we'd have to pivot cleverly and sort of say, yeah, the ideas weren't great. There was nothing here that we would run with. There's no billion-dollar ideas in here. But look at all the people that we engaged and involved in the innovation process. So there was always a kind of an upside. So I'm sure you've come across that kind of trying to find the metric that frames things okay. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Do you remember when I talked about value-driven innovation? Remember that part? This part here.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. I don't even know what am I sharing right now? Is
Nothing
it the same?
moment,
We're
Rick.
just back to gallery view, I think.
Hold on.
Yeah, so gallery view now.
I got it.
That's okay.
Okay. Oh,
there you go. Got it.
That's not the right one. But anyway, okay, no problem. So this, I think, addresses exactly what you're talking about. Okay, rather than looking at it from a high number of ideas like we did before, the focus now is to limit those ideas, okay, and not limit it from a point of view of not getting them. More let's focus on those ideas that deal with the areas that we want innovation on. Why have 10,000 ideas of which maybe 5 or 10 are going to be used, and then have 9,990 ideas and people upset because they weren't even considered. So
because
they
put their evenings and weekends into these great ideas, and we didn't even have a process for getting back to acknowledge their effort in some cases. So you turn people off the idea of participating, right?
Exactly, you turn them off, and not only that, just think about all that extra work you guys went through for those 9,990 ideas that never got used to determine that you're not going to use them, right?
Great piece of the conversation, Rick. Just a question on timing. We've just got a few minutes left. We're at the last question stage. We've got 2 hands up, Frank and Charlie. But before we get those questions asked, just to point that a number of comments have been about, well, how much do you measure when? Where do you start? Where do you build to? Where do you finish? Frank is making the comment, surely you just need to look at, what growth, what new revenue came from innovation. Isn't that the ultimate measurement? Other people are saying, don't bury yourself too quick. Start off gentle, build slow with innovation measurement. So nice comments. I agree with those comments. Any quick comment on that? And then we need to get to Frank and Charlie's questions and close.
No, I agree with those comments.
Excellent. Mr. Vole from New York. Are you coming in from New York today?
I'm coming in from South Florida. Thank you.
South Florida. That, it's close enough. Welcome, Frank.
Just a quick comment for you and Charlie and the group. Based on the energy that I sense here, take control of this yourselves. Don't rely upon the outside experts. Develop your own measurement team. Call on them for help like you're doing here, but you take control of the effort and drive it and make it happen. I think you're on a great path. I just wish we had this energy in the US. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Let me comment on what Frank says. Frank and I are also business partners, plus we know each other for over 30 years. But we've always, every single one of our projects, supporting what he's saying, we never want to go in as a consultant only, okay? We want to create a design team. The design team idea, okay, has worked perfectly because once we're finished with the project, it's not our project. It's their project. It's their conclusions. And they are going to take responsibility for making it happen. So a design team concept is crucial to any of these efforts. Go ahead.
Okay,
Back
Charlie.
to you, Owen.
Charlie.
Yeah, well, I just want to react to Frank and Rick. Thank you very much for your kind comments about the network itself. It's great to hear kind of people who are operating your level giving us that kind of feedback. So I really do appreciate that. This is a slightly different question, Rick, but I see so many people and so many organizations that concentrate on that, identify opportunities through commercialization, the ideation process, if you like. Because a lot of us are involved in the standard space, we understand there's a lot more to making innovation sticky and sustainable than that. But I'm not seeing it that commonly on the island of Ireland yet. What is it like in the US? Are people seeing that innovation is bigger than invention and there is much more to it? Or are you in a similar place in terms of maturity, I guess, innovation maturity?
Well, let me tell you that for those people that are working on the standard side, of course, then they're taking that home and implementing it. I mean, we have some big companies that are part of our mirror committee, and some let's call them mid-sized companies that are doing a very good job of that. But in general, I don't think that the diffusion that needs to take place in the United States has occurred yet. Okay, we're working now on developing different communication paths, different engagement paths through ANSI, through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, through our conference board, and others chambers, other chambers of commerce more locally, that then drive that into drive the knowledge, drive the acknowledgement that it even exists, that the 56,000 series of standards exist and how they can benefit from them. So certainly don't feel bad. I don't think Ireland is that far behind, if at all. As a matter of fact, Ireland is one of the leaders in innovation globally. So
yeah.
Charlie, let me just chime in. As the administrator of the U.S. TAG, our problem is that we've lost ground. Very, very frank. Okay, we've gone from being number 1 and 2 in the world in this particular area to, by some measurements, number 20 or 30 even. We've lost ground.
Right.
You're on the upswing, we're on the downswing. We have to reverse that. You have more potential because you're on the upswing. It's a great position to be in.
I would agree on that, Frank. Thank you again for that comment. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position to be working in Northern Ireland, but then part of the NSAI Committee for Innovation Standards and so on. So I'm seeing both sides, the UK side and the Irish side. And I'm confident that Ireland is significantly ahead of the UK in terms of thinking on this. And it's the work that Sean and the other team and the technical committee and so on have put into it. But I think if the communication of this is something that Rick and Frank, that you're working on at the moment, it's something that we're really keen on as Innovate Island, to get the message out there that there is a better way, there's a more systematic way of doing things, not forcing the standard onto anybody, but just raising awareness, skills, capability. So if we've got the opportunity to kind of span the Atlantic in some way and sort of share notes to a certain extent, that would be a fantastic outcome.
We would love that. We would love that.
Just to close, because we are at that magic point where everybody's got to get back and do some work. A lot of questions and comments in the chat we weren't able to pick up. We just didn't have time, which is pretty cool in itself. Alvaro, your comment about systemic work. One of the most important parts of innovation management systems is systemic work. How do you measure it? That's our last question, Rick. Quick comment.
Well, Alvaro and Frank and I developed something called S3, which is systemic, systematic, and sustainable. And what we're saying there is that it isn't enough just to look at your outcomes, right? You have to have the results, but you also need to have the systemic approach. So when you're looking for that, you're looking for repeatability and you're looking for integration. So when you're measuring that, you need to measure whether or not you're talking to each other, basically, through what I was talking before with internal customers. But you also need to know that when you're working on something, it's tied in to the overall, aligned with the overall strategy, and aligned with the rest of the parts of the management system.
Okay, I think that's really got to be the last comment to the last question. But Ric, great job, great discussion. Everybody loved the chat, but really great questions from the floor as well. Frank, from your supportive comments there, really appreciated. So, Mr. Tuxworth, we're finished for this hour talking about innovation operation measurement. The video and the slides will go up on the private group thread. Any other thoughts as we close?
No, just to thank you, Ric, again for coming along today. Thank you for such an international audience as well. It's great to see that our events are becoming kind of known a little bit further afield. Next week for the members, we have a coffee stop, so an informal chat. We can talk about anything and anything and nothing, and usually do. Yeah. And the week after that is bank holiday weekend, so we won't have an event there. Easiest way to find out about the events is to go onto the innovateisland.net, and there's an events page on there, and that should have a diary with all our things on it.
One last comment before you close. I mentioned at the end the IOIP, the International Association of Innovation Professionals. I ask you to go on there. There's different levels of membership. You can get a free membership, okay, if you want. But I would like to talk to you guys more about how we can work together, because you have a little bit of an organization there, which I think can benefit from us, and we can benefit from you. So
brilliant. We will pick up that conversation. Thank you very much, Ric. I think we're done, folks. Get back to your lunch, back to your work. Enjoy your weekends. Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.